How you doing?
Doing well, sir. How are you?
Good to have you here.
Glad to be here. Appreciate it.
Okay, I show 6 o'clock. So we're going to begin this workshop. I'm going to wear my mask at the start here. I want you to know we are easily 6 feet apart, and I'll be pulling this off as we get going. So we're going to start with
You have your laptop open, Mayor?
my laptop is here.
Yeah, you'll need to shut it off. You won't need it at all.
You're going to have the agenda up here.
Yeah, we'll have it all.
Would you mind grabbing one for me and Kyle as well? Of course.
Do you want the electronic? Or do you just want the Because I could forward you an electronic one if you want that.
Thank you. All right, you ready to go?
Yeah, you might want to explain the new system that we're trying to adjust the new system.
We have a new system we're working with, audio visual here in council chambers and the Dole conference room. And it works. It works really well. In fact, we're hearing ourselves 3 or 4 times in about 3 minutes. So we're trying to get it adjusted so we only talk once. And we have a new system we're working with, audio visual here in council chambers and Dole conference room. And it works. It works really well. In fact, we're hearing ourselves 3 or 4 times in about 3 minutes. So trying to get it adjusted.
It should be on the audio control side.
Yeah, no one has this meeting up on the laptop. Well, if you want to look at it.
Okay. All right, we're going to continue here now. The main purpose of the 6 o'clock meeting is to review the proposed Midvale City budget for fiscal year 2021 that began on July 1st, 2020, and it will end on June 30, 2021. So I'm going to invite our Administrative Services Director, Kyle Marr, to give us the rundown on this unusual year.
Great, thank you, Mayor.
There's a YouTube logo. That video is it's going to be. So you have a YouTube open.
Okay, great.
Sorry about that.
Okay, so the presentation loaded. You gotta love new technology.
Share the screen.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So tonight, what I wanted to do was just go through the budget. It's been a number of months since we've gone through it. And also, there have been some changes that are being proposed from the tentative budget, so we'll go through that. So feel free to ask questions as we go along. Hopefully with the new technology, we'll be able to know you have questions out there. So first, I just want to do a high-level overview of the general fund, which, as you know, is our main operating fund for the city. So total revenues are projected for fiscal year 21 to be about 19.7 million. So this is an overall decrease of 15% from our estimated actuals for fiscal year 2020, or the fiscal year we just ended. And total expenditures of about 20.3 million. And that's a 9% decrease from the current fiscal year. Staff is proposing using about 327,000 of our fund balance, which is, as you know, is our rainy day fund. And I'm calling this unrestricted. We'll get into a little bit later. The CARES Act money we received is a restricted source that we'll be also proposing to use. And of that 327,000, that's about 9% of what we have in our fund balance for the general fund. Just at a high level, some of the major revenues that are decreasing, we're expecting about $1 million decrease for fiscal year 2021. The largest is sales tax at 9%, so that's about 664,000. Our road funds that we receive from the state, so that's the gas tax charged when people buy fuel, that's a 21% decrease of about 239,000. Our transient room tax we get from hotels, we're projecting about a 37% decrease. And then our municipal telecommunications tax is a reduction of about 10% or 30,000. And this has been continually going down over a number of years due to people switching to lower priced cell phone plans, and then also people discontinuing landline use. This is a chart that shows our makeup of revenues in the general fund. So it shows taxes, which of course are a big component for us. So 50% of all the taxes we receive are sales tax, and that is about 36% of our total revenue. And then of taxes collected, 21% is property tax, or about 13% of the total revenue. So it shows of taxes, about 56% of that comes from sales tax. And this is a graph showing the expenditures for the general fund. As you can see, public safety is the largest chunk of that. So that includes our member assessment fee from Unified Police. It also includes animal control and code enforcement, and also our emergency management coordinator that we contract out through UFA, excuse me. And just as a reminder, UFA, the city doesn't pay that directly. It's through a property tax assessment to all the homes and businesses in Midvale. I like to show this because a lot of times I'll get the comment, well, if you have less revenue, you just need to find somewhere to cut. And this shows about 86% of what we spend in Midvale are items that are difficult to cut. So it's personnel, our contracted services such as police, our debt service, and then our main transfer out is to our telecommunications fund for our Utopia pledge. So these items are more difficult to cut. If we cut personnel, we won't be able to keep the service levels we currently have. Our bondholders would like us to make our debt service payments and that type of thing. And only 14% of that are items that are fairly easy for the city to cut if it needs to be. That's about 2.8 million. So a significant portion of what we spend is difficult to cut or would lead to service level decreases if we were to cut. I did want to go through, because as you noticed on that first screen, we are expecting lower revenues this year. I wanted to go through what staff is proposing and what we went through to reduce our expenditures in the general fund. So the first main thing was we held all of the department budgets flat, so um, budgets didn't get automatic increases, and we went through every increase and and we'll get to it in a minute, but we only are recommending those increases that we essentially have to do. In addition, during our budget process, we have an initial meeting with every department and we go through their needs for the department and any expansion requests they're going to have. We went through that during January and February. When COVID hit in March, we actually went back to the department heads and requested budget cuts from every department. That was able to save the city about $151,000. We are proposing to delay vehicle replacements and funding 1 year, so that saved us 179,000. And just as a reminder, how our fleet replacement program works at the city is every year we contribute a certain amount towards the replacement of a vehicle. So, for example, if a vehicle has a 5-year life, each year we contribute 1/5 of the replacement cost to cover that. So when it's time to replace that vehicle, we don't have this large expenditure that we have to try to find money for. So, and then all capital projects, except for those ones listed, and we'll get to those in a minute, those have a different funding source, are proposing to be deferred until the economy improves. Okay. And then additionally, staff is not proposing any employee COLA or merit increases at the current time. And then, excuse me, just to keep in mind, during the initial budget process in January and February, we did have budget requests from the departments totaling 1.2 million. So those are expansion requests that were requested by the departments that we're not recommending for approval at this time. And we've been through this before, but I did want to just quickly go over what we looked at in terms of budget reductions. And I've split this into two different categories. So there's short and long-term reductions. So those you would do if you don't expect the shortfall to be for a long time or there isn't a structural imbalance. Longer term, if there's a fundamental structural imbalance with the budget. So as you can see, many of these that have the green check mark, I've already discussed. I do want to comment on that increased revenues. Why that was checked was we did increase the sanitation fund fees by 10% in order to cover increases by Ace Disposal and Transjordan and to make sure that the fund would be financially sustainable. Longer term budget reductions have more severe consequences. So that would be looking at service level reductions or mandatory time off programs for employees, reducing benefit costs and that type of thing. So right now, since we're not expecting this to be a long-term dip in the economy, we were focusing on more short-term fixes. So because I keep presenting a lot of budget information to you, and I am scheduled for the entire hour, I thought I would break it up a little bit with some Utah trivia. You don't necessarily have to answer it. I'm not going to put you guys on the spot, but I thought you may or may not know this. So the first fact is Utah is the only state whose capital consists of 3 words, and all 3 words in Salt Lake City have 4 letters each. Next, I would like to talk about the CARES Act projects. So we received about 994,000 of funding on June 30th. So that's actually when the county deposited into our bank account. And we've had some initial discussions on what the city's been looking at. So far in the last fiscal year, we've only spent about 6,200 of that amount we've received. So what we did as staff was we looked at the projects that we feel are worth exploring further, and we have a fairly good idea about the costs and the viability of doing them. Some are ones we've already committed to. So the first one would be PPE and sanitation expenses. Um, and as we had previously discussed, UFA and UPD don't get a direct CARES Act disbursement, so they've requested that we reimburse them for some of their COVID-19 related expenses. Um, the HR department is looking at HRIS software and grammar redaction software to hopefully automate the process so not as much paperwork's needed. That one we're still looking at options on, so there isn't a definite direction in that. The next one's technology to work remotely. One of the things we quickly realized is we had a number of employees that are still on desktop computers, and for them to be able to telecommute effectively, we need to switch them to laptops. In addition, working from home, many employees needed a city-provided monitor or docking station or other small items to make their workload better and make it easier for them to work. Another item that we're almost finished with are the city council chamber upgrades, which you're seeing us test out tonight. So that will allow us to have both an in-person meeting and a virtual attendance. And then there's been some camera upgrades and other upgrades done that we'll discuss further later. We are looking at a new phone system. We haven't made a decision on that yet, but one of the issues is we discovered during the pandemic is we have to have at least 2 people in the city hall just to answer phones because we aren't able to easily remote the phone system for the main lines. And as I said, we're still looking at that. And then many of you probably remember the issues we had with express bill pay, especially in March when the website was down continuously for weeks. And we were expecting our residents to pay online, but the system was down for them to pay. So we are looking at upgrading our bill payment system. And one thing with all of these we are considering very heavily is the ongoing costs after the first year that the CARES Act pays for, because we certainly don't want we don't want to have to ask for additional monies for future years because we're bound to it through what we purchase. As I had mentioned, we held all the general fund budgets flat. However, there are a few items that we determined were necessary that we did need to pay for. In addition, there were a couple items that the council had agreed on that were important for the city. So the list, some of these we've gone through. One of them, we had discussed putting a little bit of money away for our fiscal year 22 harvest days. And just as a reminder on that, Laura has to start doing purchases and making deposits in the fiscal year before the actual harvest days. So as you know, this year's harvest days was canceled, but next year, towards the end of this fiscal year, there will be some costs that will be incurred. There was also interest in putting some money away for a future city celebration, so that has been put in the budget. And as we had discussed, the server and SQL licensing is at the end of its life, so that it's at a point where we can't wait another year to update those licenses. And the city attorney, their e-prosecutor software, the current software is no longer being supported, so they were being forced to switch. And we had discussed the grants for the Boys and Girls Club, Arts Council, and the CBC. The largest is our member assessment increase to UPD. And just as a reminder, this amount is lower than what was presented in the tentative budget after the negotiation, after the UPD board had determined what the amount would be. One thing I don't think was on the prior one in the tentative budget, but it was included in the tentative budget, is we are proposing to fund the employer portion of the insurance increases for the general fund. That's about $66,000. And just to go over the general fund balances, we had discussed we're proposing to use some of the fund balance this year. Even with that usage, we'll still have about 3.4 million in our reserves. How the state auditor looks at it is they look at it compared to our budgeted revenues. So that's 17% of our budgeted revenues. We have a financial policy in place that recommends, it's not required, but it recommends a 15% fund balance reserve. So we still are with that. And then on the chart, you'll see that line at the bottom. That's the 5% minimum that the state requires. And then that brownish, reddish brownish line at the very top, that's the 25% maximum by state law. So we're well within those guidelines. So up to our fact number 2 on Utah trivia. The highest point in the state of Utah is Kings Peak, which I didn't know this, and I should because I've lived in Utah my life. That's actually in Duchesne County, and that's 13,528 feet above sea level. If you believe the internet, that is a picture of it, but I haven't been there, so I'm not sure. You can never trust what's on the internet sometimes. So next, now that we've done this high-level overview, I did just want to go through some of the detailed budgets for each department, just so you have a good feeling and get a refresher on some of the major items for each of the departments. The first one, we'll just go over the revenue detail, and we've discussed most of these taxes in detail. I do want to point out, so you'll see an estimated fiscal year 2020 column. That is what the estimate was we would receive at the end of the year, not necessarily the beginning budget. So you may remember at the end of June, I came with a very long budget amendment because I was looking to do budget reductions because I knew our revenues wouldn't come in as expected. So those are the amounts we expected to receive at that time. So it's a little different than what the budget previously was at the beginning of the year. Just as of note, the franchise and motor vehicle, it looks a little higher because we are getting new residents in Jordan Bluffs. There's more people moving in, so there is an expectation that because they would be paying franchise fees in motor vehicles, those would go up a little. And then on telecommunications, the budget last year was $300,000, so we are expecting a decrease. And then the decline seemed to be flattening, but that's why it looks like an increase. But the original budget for last year was $300,000, so it really is it's a $30,000 reduction. And then on licenses and permits, just a couple notes. So on business licenses, we are expecting a decline in revenue due to pandemic, since the theory would be less businesses would be opening. The building revenue budget was kept flat from last year. It does show an estimate of 706,837, and the budget last year was 7, so we kept that flat. And we received some other small miscellaneous revenue. And I clicked the wrong button. Okay. On grants and intergovernmental, a lot of our grants are one-time grants. The ones I'd like to point out is there is the Justice Assistance Grant that the Unified Police Department did receive, and you approved it last month for coronavirus grant expenses. That's a flow through to UPD. So once we receive the money, we cut a check back to UPD for that. The grant we received for the EPA is for our project site coordinator that works with Bingham Junction and Jordan Bluffs. And I did want to note, we did receive a reduction in our state homeless grant funds this year, although the amount we do receive definitely helps offset our UPD member assessment. And then charges for services, the main thing I would like to highlight there is each year we go and recalculate the administrative fees, and you may be wondering or not remember what those are. So we have city employees that are paid out of the general fund, but they do work for other funds. A good example is my position, for example, where I work on the budget for multiple departments. Our utility billing staff, they are working mostly for the utility fund, but they're getting paid out of the general fund. And there's expenses also associated with that. And we charge those back to the different funds. So for example, the water fund is paying part of those expenses. So we actually do that analysis every year to make sure we're charging a fair amount back to those different funds. And then on the building fees, such as the zoning and plan check fees, we left those at last year's amount. We looked at the development that was occurring and felt that the budgets would be fair. You'll notice they do show increases because at the end of last fiscal year, I did reduce those because it looked like we might not receive all we were budgeting for. On fines and forfeitures, it does show those as increases, but we did leave those just at the fiscal year 2020 original budget. As you are aware, the court has been closed and they haven't been doing all of their normal cases. So we are expecting a pickup when we're able to return to full functionality. And then the interest shows quite a steep decline, and that's because we were using the interest from the road bond proceeds. We were crediting that in the general fund, and those funds have almost all been spent. So flipping from revenue to expense, one of the main things with this is we did create a communications department this year. The communications function had their expenses spread across multiple departments, and it was very hard both for our communications director and myself to track. So we put those into their own budget and then pulled those line items out from the other budgets. Just as of note, and it was on the other sheet, there was a request for sign maintenance for our LED sign and then file creation that's recommended in the budget. The city attorney, we had discussed them having to switch their prosecuting software. And then just as a reminder, that estimate is what we were estimating them to spend, not necessarily their budget. So in many of the departments, they weren't able to go to training because the trainings were canceled. I ended up pulling that funding back last year to help cover some of the expected budget shortfalls. So that's also why you're seeing some of the increases you are. And then public safety, as we discussed, there was the UPT contract increase. And then I have put a budget in for reimbursements to UPD and UFA. Administrative services, which are my department. So administrative services includes finance, justice court, and information technology. As you can see, there's not a lot of huge changes there. And the justice court, of course, they didn't spend as much money because the court was closed. So we're expecting those to come back, those expenses to come back up. And then in information technology, they had a number of one-time projects last year that we didn't continue with different projects this year to help cover the budget gap. And then the information technology director did make some voluntary cuts to help get the budget in line. In public works, the main reason for reductions is all of those vehicle replacements are delayed. So normally they would get a yearly charge to help save up for their vehicle replacements. So that's the majority of their declines. The parks and cemeteries is an exception. They requested and needed a budget increase for parks and median maintenance with the additional parks and medians that they've had to take on. The hazardous tree maintenance, which we did discuss at the budget retreat, that number is a significant reduction from the initial amount. So those two things are proposed increases for parks and cemetery. In community development, one of the main things that we did was we consolidated business licensing into community development administration. Since we don't have a dedicated employee just doing business licensing, they're doing multiple tasks within community development. So we thought it would be better to centralize those costs. In addition, planning and zoning had some one-time projects last year that we didn't replace with another project this year. And then transfers out. The main transfer out is to the telecommunications fund. So that's to pay for our Utopia pledge. And I have a slide on that we'll go over later, but we were actually able to reduce the transfer because Utopia was able to increase their OpEx reimbursement. So that was great help for our budget this year. And then we're also proposing transferring about $155,000 to the Information Technology Fund for those CARES Act projects. So that's restricted money that we're proposing to transfer out to help pay for those projects. And you might wonder why the difference between fiscal year 2020 and 2021 is so large. It's almost $2 million. The reason for that is we were funding multiple capital projects last year. Okay, we're up to number 3 on the Utah trivia. I know everyone was waiting anxiously.
Yes.
So, and I don't know how to pronounce this. I am a very, thank you. It's Levan. I am a bad Utahn. I haven't been to most of these places, so I didn't know it's in Juab County. But Mormon church leader Brigham Young gave this town its name in the 1860s, but no one quite knows why. Some say that Young had a sense of humor because the town is in the middle of the state. Because of that, he named it Naval backwards.
I have family that live there.
Well, don't tell them I didn't know how to pronounce it.
All right.
In the capital projects fund this year, it's a little lean. As we mentioned, we are proposing deferring any future projects until the economy recovers. But we do receive restricted sales tax. You've probably heard of the quarter-cent sales tax option. We receive a portion of that has to be restricted for road projects. So we are proposing sidewalk, curb, and gutter replacement at the same levels as last year, and then the remainder going into pavement management. One thing of note you probably see on here is there have been 2 parking structure loans that have been approved for CHG and the Zions Bank project. While those haven't been executed and we haven't received the funds, I did put those in the budget. So if they are to be executed in the future, that the budget is there to do that. Flipping over to the enterprise fund. So just as a background, which I know all of you know, but in case there's anyone watching, the enterprise funds are a lot of those items that are on your utility bills. So it's your water, your sewer, your storm drain, sanitation. We actually split all those revenues out to make sure we're accounting for them properly. And so we're going to go through those different funds right now. So in the water fund, you'll notice I did increase the user charge revenue. That's due to additional connections and usage. It's not due to a fee increase, which we didn't pass any fee increases with the fee schedule this year. And as a reminder, we are planning on doing a fee rate study in the fall to winter in conjunction with the sewer rate study, if that's approved tonight. And then the water connection fees, I did adjust that budget to match what we received historically. And then, development still looks fairly strong in the city. So we felt that was justified. And then you'll notice an interest revenue decrease. That's due to the spend down of bond proceeds. So any bond proceeds we receive, and if we haven't spent, they are in an interest bearing account. We do receive revenue from that. Now for the operating expenses. Sorry, it's so small. It's especially small to me looking at it. Some of these we've already gone over. I do want to highlight some of the ones that are new since the tentative budget. One is the meter increase request. So we did have in the tentative budget an additional $61,000 for that year 2 meter swap out. And just so you know, that is underway, and we've received our first few hundred of those meter change outs. So they're actively being done, but I will give you a more thorough update next week during my department report. We are asking for an additional almost 28,000 for new meter installs. So when development occurs, they are paying a meter fee, so we are receiving revenue for that, but we missed putting that into the budget. So there is an offsetting revenue for that. So that is a change. And then when we looked further at our wholesale water budget, we realized we weren't budgeting for the contractual amount we are obligated to pay Jordan Valley Water. I had put the rate increase in, but I hadn't put the actual full contract amount, which I didn't discover until I was doing the final budget amendments for last year. And then another item that came up in our professional services is the water department's required to do a source protection plan, which will be about $25,000. And that is something we're required to do by the state. So that's a change that wasn't in the original tentative budget. Some of the other items on the capital side is we do put a placeholder in for other capital projects. As we had discussed, there was a request to put in a chlorination system. And then we just did it's more of an accounting change. We had discussed the purchase of a utility truck for the water fund. That was originally budgeted as a vehicle purchase, and we moved it to transfers out. So it can be purchased out of the fleet fund. It's more of a procedural thing. It really doesn't change the bottom line, but it makes the accounting much easier on our end. And then switching over to the sewer fund, you'll notice there really aren't any changes to the revenue. So I did a revenue analysis and it looked like the budget we had would suffice for the current year. Just as a reminder, the fee schedule didn't include any fee increases. However, we are proposing to do a rate study that would be done in conjunction with the water rate study. And as I said, there's the utility fee rate study proposal. And then the sewer department needed an increase for their electricity line item, mostly due to the lift stations. And then with the new SCADA system, we did need to put a little bit of money aside for maintenance on that system. And then on the capital debt service side, we put in 100,000 placeholder for sewer line replacement. We don't have any exact projects right now for that. Their normal vehicle replacement charge, and then infrastructure maintenance, and then debt service. So those haven't changed since the tentative budget. Then moving on to the stormwater fund, when I did my revenue analysis, see a slight increase due to the additional development and residences within Midvale. And once again, no rate increases were included in the fee schedule. It's already been passed. However, we are requesting a fee rate study and a master plan update. So that will be around 75,000. And then on the debt service, we did the same thing in terms of putting a placeholder of 100,000 for stormwater projects. And then there's the debt service number, so it hasn't changed that much from the prior year on the debt service side. And then street lighting, there was only a minor request to increase the electricity budget by $2,000. Just of note, at the current rate we're spending, the fund balance would be extinguished in fiscal year 2022. So we'll be looking at some options for that in the upcoming year to give you some ideas of what we can do for that. And then just as a FYI, as you notice, debt service is over half of what this fund is paying out every year. Those payments are expected to continue till 2024, and that was to retrofit the streetlight system in Moonville. And the sanitation fund, as we had discussed, the fee schedule did include a 10% fee increase. And just as a refresher, if anyone's watching, the reasons why for that was we did have a 3.1% increase from Ace Disposal, who's our contract hauler for waste, and then $2.50 per ton increase at Transjordan, the landfill. And then telecommunications, as I had mentioned, we were able to just decrease the transfer from the general fund by about 44,000 because Utopia/UIA is paying more of their OPEX reimbursement back than we were originally expecting. And then just as a reminder, our pledge payments go up every 2 year goes up 2% every year to Utopia, but we were actually able to decrease the transfer thanks to Utopia and UIA paying more of their OPEX back. So we're almost to the end. Everyone's still awake, so I'm happy about that. But here's our fact number 4. Elmo in Emery County was settled by the Ericksons, Larsons, Mortensons, and Oviats. So the first initial from each name was taken to form the city's name. And on our internal service funds, so just as a refresher, if anyone out there, so what they know, an internal service fund only has one customer, and it's the city. So each city department pays a fee for the services that the internal service fund provides. In the case of fleet, well, of course, the fleet fund handles the city's fleet. So we charge each fund and department for their usage of that fund. And as I said, we were deferring those for 1 year due to the current economic situation. And then one change from the tentative was a transfer from the water fund for that utility truck. And then on the expense side, there wasn't any changes with the exception of putting that utility truck in the purchases. The only replacements proposed this year is a Caterpillar loader and then a water truck that was due for replacement. The interesting thing with the Caterpillar loaders, the way the current market is, we'll actually receive more money doing a trade-in on that Caterpillar loader than what the new one will cost due to state contract pricing we receive. So it's kind of a no-brainer to go ahead and that's a general fund asset, but it makes financial sense to do it now. And then the information technology is another internal service fund that deals with the city's computers and then also the city infrastructure such as switches and routers. The main difference between the change from the tentative was those CARES Act projects, which are on the next page, which we've discussed before. Working remote technology, the chamber upgrades, possible phone system replacement, and a possible bill payment system upgrade. And then just as of note, just our normal computer replacement rotations about 64,000, and then there's a proposal for about 33,000 and just normal IT infrastructure replacement to make sure everything works the way it should. Because as we all know, we learned during the pandemic when we don't have our IT working properly, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to do our jobs. So I did want to go, now that I've given you the entire budget and you've had a minute to digest it, if you do approve the budget tonight, what we'll be doing from a financial perspective is the budget book will be submitted to the GFOA, which is the Government Finance Officers Association, for an award. We receive a similar award for our comprehensive annual financial report. It's the same agency that does that. We will be doing a more in-depth quarterly analysis of revenues and expenses. So I normally send you a budget report every month. The quarterly one will be much more detailed. We'll have more narrative and more projections moving forward than you typically see. One thing you as a council have mentioned, and we've actually had many internal discussions on as staff, is revenue and cost cover analysis, making sure that the fees we charge are fair and they're covering their costs. One thing of recent was building permits we've discussed, utility fees is another. So that's one focus we're going to have on the year coming up. The city has been great at doing long-term financial planning and forecasting. We've done 5-year analysis every year, but this one, and the only reason it wasn't done this year is because COVID was so hard to predict. But the goal is to do a more enhanced long-term financial planning and analysis and have more what-if scenarios built into those. With that, in conjunction, would be more refinement and additions to our current financial policies, which are great and are a good starting point. And then one thing that the GFOA likes to see when they're doing their budget, and they consider it a budget best practice, is that the city establish overarching strategic goals. And a lot of these are non-financial goals. And then we as departments link our individual goals to those overarching city goals and then prioritize funding based off of those goals. So we'll be looking also to engage you as a council in that process. And then of course, this is my baby of the year. I do have to give a plug for the budget book if there's anyone out there. So it's quite a lengthy document, but it has a lot of good information in it. It'll give a good budget overview and give you an idea of the major initiatives of the city. It has detailed budgets for every department. It also describes what each department does, because I think a lot of people, including us seasoned people, maybe don't know everything that a department does. And this document gives you that information. It tells you how the city's budget process works, what the city's debt looks like, and it also gives you detailed information on the city's major revenue sources. So it's available on our website, and it'll be updated tomorrow with whatever is decided tonight. So that's my major presentation. Are there any questions for me? I do have to give a shout out while I have the time to our IT department. So especially Matt, Pierce, and Juan, they've been spearheading the chamber upgrade conversion, and they were not given a lot of time to do this. We knew for the truth and taxation hearing, we had to have an anchor location. And after our last attempt to do both an anchor location and a virtual, we had those major feedback issues and other issues. And IT really has put in a lot of extra time to get those done. So I want to express my appreciation to them because I mean, it was a lot of work.
Well, thank you, Kyle.
Thank you, Mayor.
Another grand production there. And I can see why you're proud of that budget book. It has everything in it that we need. Is there any questions from the council on budget items for Kyle? Okay, seeing none. Our next meeting is scheduled to begin in 14 minutes. Are there any subjects the council would like to take up in that 14-minute period?
I will just note that there's quite a bit of flashing going on right now with the main video feed. I don't know if that's just me or if everyone's seeing that.
I am also seeing that.
Okay,
Hey,
I'm about to have a seizure, I think. It's very,
I was going to say that was going to be our opportunity to mess with Dustin and say that no one else is seeing.
I would have called 911.
I thought it was a planned psychedelic light show, but
Earlier, we called it an 80s music video.
I do want to welcome Lieutenant Malone here tonight, who's representing the UPD, ensuring our safety as we perform our delicate operations tonight in setting up the budget for the new year. So we're glad to have you here. Grateful to our IT folks. Grateful to have our PIO, Laura Magnuson here also, who's helping us. And we had one resident come and Laura went and talked to him and he decided he didn't need to make any comments. So he walked back out. So that was easy. Yeah, that's pretty psychedelic, isn't it? Woo-hoo. Reboot time.
Would it be any easier if I went back to my office and did it there? I mean, whatever's easiest for you guys. Okay. Okay.
We needed $25 more in IT.
So just the amount of technology that went into this.
I know.
I'm surprising it's working as well as it is.
Yeah.
You wanna,
Yeah.
do that, share that. You have your listing.
It'd be nice to have a flag with us tonight too. Huh?
I like your haircut, Dustin.
My dog likes the new space I'm using for these meetings. She keeps jumping up in my lap. And I have the window behind me, so when it's dark outside, that means the meeting's over.
That's right. That's right. It's gonna come earlier and earlier, right, Council?
That's true. Uh-huh.
Dustin, if that's the case, I'm gonna get some black paper and just run it over.
Meeting adjourned.
I like that. That's thinking on your feet, council member. Paul Glover. Heidi, did you get my phone call message about September 1st?
I did. Sorry, I didn't have a chance to call you back yet, but I will tomorrow.
Okay, all right.
I'm gonna need all the guidance I can get.
Have a problem Friday.
The neat thing about it is everyone here will work to make it successful for you. Yep.
Have a
you've got great
problem
backup.
Friday. The mayor scheduled a meeting for me at 10 o'clock in the morning.
Do we need some more facts from Kyle?
We could go as soon as I get done. It's gonna be
And
online.
maybe everyone should remember too that they're on to
Probably
mute if
only
they're
gonna take
talking
about a
right
half
now.
hour, 45 minutes. So we could go up.
Kane, you might want to mute.
Kane, you're not on mute.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Luckily, he didn't say anything too bad about any of us.
Other than
I was just breaking the news to my wife that I had a conflict on Friday.
Matt, does that mean you're gonna entertain us with some fun facts?
Oh, you don't want to get me started.
I felt like that. I felt like you volunteered.
We kind of do want to get you started, Matt.
I'm with Glenn.
Yeah, I got nothing. Although I did do a deep dive on a YouTube channel on chemistry this last weekend, and I found a very funny Australian chemist who does experiments on there, and I couldn't stop watching it. Last night I was watching, he was ranking his favorite elements in order. So anyway, there you go. Something to really entertain you.
You need to get a life, Matt.
I was thinking I was bad because I got sucked into Shark Week.
You wanted to watch Mike Tyson punch a shark? Is that?
I didn't watch Mike Tyson. I did watch Shaq. Please don't judge me for that statement. He was in there with whale sharks and he had me at whale shark. And then I was like, I'm really paying attention to Shaquille O'Neal. It's time to give up. Go read a book.
Kyle gave us the highest elevation in Utah. What's the lowest elevation in Utah and where is it?
I believe it's the Virgin River Gorge.
It is. It's Beaver Dam. And it's 2,180 feet above sea level. So there's 13,000 feet between high and low. That'll give you a bloody nose.
For the 5 people watching on YouTube, I did just want to point out that we have to wait until 7 o'clock to officially start, in case you started watching in the last few minutes. Anyway, I thought just in case you're like, is this what a city council meeting really is?
Where I come from, the average elevation is 500 feet above sea level.
And that's in the tallest building in town, right?
Yep. That's if you take the elevator all the way to the 5th floor.
That's like those things I see about Ski, Oklahoma, and it's got a picture of an oil derrick out there in the middle of the plains. It's kind of funny. Welcome, Stacy. How's that road down there? Is that what you're going to talk about? Okay. I noticed UDOT is grinding off the transitions between concrete and asphalt throughout the valley that I've bumped on before, but they are leveled out now. So we might be able to get some assistance there. Yes, it would. Open this up. Isn't it right on the top here? We need to put it right there. Got it here. Whether I can find it in time is.
Hey, Kyle,
Yes.
as part of your presentation, are you planning to talk about, yes, even though we're going through truth and taxation, but it really the intent was to try to keep it flat due to the GO bond and some of those, were you going to bring that in?
Right. I did a presentation that basically walks through the truth and taxation process and exactly what we're doing and where it's really revenue neutral, but because it's changing the category, that's why it's advertised as a tax increase. So yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure people understood that, and they may, I mean, some people may say a slight increase than what they had before, but that's going to be, you know, if they did different valuations and, you know, they may pay a little bit more, but somebody else is going to pay a little bit less because of that. So,
Right.
all right, thanks.
It's 7 o'clock and I want to call to order this Midvale City Special Council meeting having to do with the truth and taxation. And we welcome residents and we welcome Lieutenant Malone from UPD who's here with us. And we've got a couple of staff members, Kyle Maurer and Laura is with us up on the stand. We appreciate all of the effort of IT as we've got a new system here now to televise our meetings, and unfortunately, it went on the fritz aimed at the dais just as our meeting began, so we may be in a blackout up here, which is okay with us. I want to welcome everybody here, and we'll begin with a pledge of allegiance. And so if we'd all stand, please, and repeat with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We are socially and functionally distanced up here at the front, so I'm going to remove my mask, if you don't mind. We'll begin with a roll call. And Rory, would you perform that, please?
Yes. Councilmember Sperry,
Here.
Robinson,
Here.
Glover,
Here.
Brown,
Here.
and Gettle.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, we're present and accounted for. I want to announce also that at this very hour, Mid-Valley Elementary School is having its parade, open house, and I wish we could be there, but there's other things we have to do too. So congratulations to Canyon School District in getting Mid-Valley Elementary up. I toured it last week, and it's a beautiful facility. I'm sure the students, teachers, families are going to enjoy their time there. We'll now have public comments. Any person wishing to comment on any item not otherwise scheduled for a public hearing on the agenda may submit their comment via email to lmagnus@midvale.com prior to the completion of this portion of the meeting. Items brought forward to the attention of the City Council will be turned over to staff to provide a response outside the City Council meeting. And I know we have one, just one so far?
I have one.
Okay. So I'd like to invite Stacy Phillips to come up. She has indicated she has some general comments that she'd like to make.
Mask on, off, can you hear me? Okay.
Whatever you're comfortable with. You're far enough away that.
Yeah. So what do you need? Stacy Phillips,
And
67.
yeah.
And my
Stacy
address,
Phillips.
6797 Sienna Park Lane, Midvale. I'm in the northeast quadrant. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm coming to talk to you today about an issue that I and my neighbors have been dealing with for years. I have been actively pursuing a solution for the last 3 years. It's called a dip and shake issue with the vehicles that are using the Union Park exit ramp. The backyards of our homes sit next to the off-ramp. The shaking has been getting worse over the years. My neighbor used to be the one to bug the city about getting the transition fixed, but then she moved, so I had to pick up the mantle. I first contacted the city via email August 7th, 2018. Then again, 8 more times in 2019, with the last email being on November 25th, 2019, and I was told that we couldn't do anything because it was weather dependent, because it was November. Spring came and COVID hit. Oh, and then we had an earthquake, a quake that I didn't even feel because my house shakes so much and so hard. I didn't even realize we had an earthquake. I was fully aware of the issues that COVID has caused, and so I delayed emailing the city until June 15th. At that time, Glenn Kennedy said in an email reply that they were working on a solution and we should see the shaking go down in 8 weeks. Keith Ledwig then replied on June 22nd and said that the fix would take place late July, early August. Didn't hear anything for a month, so once again, I had to follow up. And on July 21st, I asked when this was scheduled to happen. I was told, oh, we haven't heard. Don't know, I'll follow up with contractor. But then we found out that the contractor was out of town until August 3rd. and that they said it might take place sometime in September. Today is now August 10th, and I have yet to hear from anyone in the city regarding this. I thought about sending an email, but why? It will be ignored, it will be pushed off, and it'll be November again, and weather dependent. Nothing's going to happen. We have taken many pictures of my home and my neighbors' homes that have cracks in the walls, nails that are popping, cement foundations with major cracks. We have a high pressure water pipe 5 feet outside of our backyard that has been shaken as well. We had a leak in that pipe a few years ago and it had a major sinkhole in the backyard. If that pipe cracks, our homes don't stand a chance. We've been told that. This is not minor rattling. This is window shaking, light fixtures swaying. The walls are moving. They creak loudly. You stand in the hallway and you can feel our homes moving. We are awakened from sleep in the middle of the night due to the shaking. It sounds like cars are going to crash into our home, which on a side note, I'm surprised that that hasn't happened because there's no barrier between the freeway and our homes except for a flimsy little vinyl fence. So I'm begging, the city approved these houses 15 years ago to be built where they are. We are having issues and I have been fighting for 3 long years and I want some answers and I can't get them. So I thought I'd show up in person and maybe that will light a fire. That's all.
Thank you, Stacy. That is an issue that we have dealt with for a long time and coordinating with several agencies, and you're not off our grid. We're very aware of your issue.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. Laura, you have a public comment?
I do, Mayor. I have a public comment from Lorraine Butler. To the council and city staff, I have a few empty parcels of land surrounding my neighborhood. The time will come when a developer will want to build on them. They are in existing neighborhoods, and I would like you to feel that you would not allow RM 25 housing developments at these sites. Large one-off Park Street and other small ones in the area between 7300 and 7800 southwest of State. As my husband and I drove around the city, we were sad that other than Topgolf, there are no entertainment venues. We build, but seem not to retain the revenue. Our residents travel to other cities to play and recreate. I hear the "we are working on it" phrase a lot. For years, we have been working on it. Be safe, be mentally well. Thank you, Lorraine Butler.
Thank you, Laura. Any other public comments?
No, sir.
All right. We'll now move to a public hearing. I'll entertain a motion to
Mayor, I
open-
motion we move into a public hearing.
Okay.
We have a motion and a second to open up this public hearing. Any comments or questions on the motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Yes.
Any opposed? All right, we are now in a public hearing to consider adoption of the proposed Midvale City budget for fiscal year 2021 that began last July 1st and will end next June 30th, 2021. Kyle, would you give us the action on that?
Great, thank you, Mayor. Great, so what I would like to do is to go through the process of truth in taxation and go through the state law requiring it and some more of the detail on it. So it looks like so the first thing I'd like to go over is what exactly is the certified tax rate calculation that the county does every year. So what this is the county auditor in each county in this state calculates a certified tax rate each year for each entity. This calculation is to make sure the city receives the same amount of property tax revenue received in the prior year, plus any new growth that occurs in the city. So for example, if a new business comes to the city or if a new home's built, we do receive additional revenue for that new home or that new business. But for the base, we still receive the same base amount. This rate is then applied to every assessed taxable value for every property in Midvale. And one thing I'd like to point out, many homeowners have seen this. The state law does allow a residential exemption of 45%. So the assessed value of a home for a home that's their primary dwelling is reduced by 45%. And I've pulled an example. This is an actual off of a property tax assessment. And then one important note is there's no automatic increases such as inflation that's built into this formula. In its simplest terms is you receive the same amount as the prior year plus any new growth that's received. So when a taxable value of a business or a home goes up, that certified rate goes down. So that is an example of what's happening in our current market where values are going up. In order for us to still receive the same amount as the prior year, the actual tax rate goes down. The opposite also is true. So if a taxable value goes down, then the actual tax rate goes up. And an example of this was that the housing crash is probably not the best word, the housing decline of 2008, 2009. So if the city decides it would like to receive more revenue or needs to receive more revenue than what the certified rate calculates, it goes through a process called truth in taxation, which is outlined in state code. As FYI, I know some of you were on the council at that time. The last time the city went through truth in taxation was the 2016 calendar year. So that was for the fiscal year 2017. So the process is before June 22nd, the city must accept the rate that the county calculates or has to declare its intent to exceed that rate, which you as a city council did on June 16th through resolution 2020 R29. And then my part is I did notify the county auditor of this. One thing we do have to do as part of this process is we have to have a public hearing, which we are having right now before the tax increase can be voted on. What's interesting is the county auditor must approve the public hearing date, and that public hearing date can't conflict with another entity in the county with the same type of increase. So for example, if the school district was proposing to raise their taxes and we as Midvale City were proposing to raise our taxes, we wouldn't be able to have our meeting on the same date. And then another important note is we can't have any other public hearing items on the agenda, which is one reason why the budget and the tax rate is the only thing we're discussing tonight. And the notices are placed on utahlegals.com, the public notice website, and then it has to be published in the newspaper also. So 2 weeks before the public hearing, the Salt Lake County publishes what's called a combined advertisement with the other entities proposing tax increases. And there's very specific requirements on what that ad must look like, down to the font, down to the size. The black border around it is required in state code. And then 1 week before the public hearing, the city publishes their own ad in addition to the county ad, which is run for the second time. And then the hearing's held that's listed on the truth in taxation advertisement. This is the actual county combined ad that was published. And it lists all of the entities in Salt Lake County that are proposing a tax increase, and then it lists their public hearing date. And then there's also a contact number on there. This is our truth in taxation advertisement that was placed in the newspaper. And all of this, as I said, it's all generated by state code down to the wording. On the tax website, I actually just put in the numbers and then it generates what the wording will be. So that's why it's in that precise format. So the big question tonight is, why are we going through truth in taxation right now? One important thing is, while residents and businesses just see one tax rate on their property tax notice, It actually is made up of different categories. I like to use the term buckets. For Midvale, we have two. One is just general operations, and then one is for general obligation bond debt service. That print screen at the bottom is actually through the state system that we go to enter our tax rates in, just to show those different rates. The city's general obligation debt service payments ended last fiscal year, and just as a reminder, that was to construct the police building that Unified Police is currently using. And staff is proposing that we move the amount we were receiving from the general obligation category to general obligation, to general operations. And because we're increasing that one category, that is why the state requires us to go through the truth and taxation process. This is a sample property tax bill. It actually is a property tax bill I pulled. They are public records, so you can pull them off the assessor's website. And as you can see, the far right column that's gray, and then that first green column, there are a few minor dollar differences between the two, but for the most part, they are the same amount. And the reason is because we are essentially receiving the same amount of revenue. It's just we're moving that general obligation tax revenue part up to general operations. More details. So in 2019, for this residence, their property tax that Midvale City received was $177.48. In 2020, if the rate increase is not approved, it would actually, if the rate is approved, I read that wrong, would be $175.08. So essentially it's the same amount. There's a few dollar differences due to how this property has increased or decreased in value relative to other Midvale City properties. An important note is other taxing entities may raise or lower their rates. For example, both Salt Lake County and Unified Fire Authority passed tax increases in December, so that those portions are increasing if you look at the detail on the bill. So on the tax rate summary, this does show the 2020 certified tax rate, so last year's tax rate, what the county auditor calculated, which as you can see, the general obligation part is blank, and then what the proposal is. And then right below that, it does break out our prior year tax revenue, around the 72,000 we're receiving in new growth to come up with the total. So if the council chooses not to accept the tax increase and accepts the rate calculated by the county auditor, the revenue decrease to the city would be about 13%. So that'd be about a $331,000 decrease in revenue. And just as a note on that chart, so our new growth, so the new residences and buildings, we are expected to receive about 72,000 more in revenue. And just as a note on that, we are receiving that new revenue. However, we have new residents and businesses we do have to provide services to. So that money is really already being committed to providing those services. And then this is a pie chart that shows on a $298,000 home what the property tax bill actually looks like, the different entities that receive money. So Midvale City receives about 8% of that. The school districts, and I did combine, there is a Jordan School District debt service levy on there. The school district in total receives 54% of that. And if the proposed tax rate is not approved, the average Midvale City resident would see their property tax bill drop. And that's just the Midvale City portion, not overall, would drop approximately $26. So the staff's proposal of the use of the funds is, and I'm going to get to that in a minute, but first, so our total property tax revenue, if this increase is improved, is about 2.6 million, a little over 2.6 million. That does represent about 13% of our general fund revenue. And the uses for that, we have an increase from a unified police department on our member assessment of a little over $250,000. And then the remainder would be used for debt service on the current city hall, justice court, park improvement, and street light bonds. If the increase is not approved, staff would recommend using additional fund balance to cover that gap. So that would increase the fund balance usage to almost 20% of our rainy day fund. The other alternative would be we would need to look at more aggressive cost reductions. After the budget reduction process we went through this year, it most likely would reduce in service level decreases. So that's all I had. Are there any questions from the council? Thank you.
Council members have any questions for Kyle on that presentation?
I just want to note for people who are watching, it's not that we don't or haven't had questions. It's just that we've been through this discussion several times. So those questions have been answered more than once. Just didn't want everyone to think we're sitting here dumbfounded by anything.
Just so, just as a note, the reason that these obligation bonds have gone off, but when we were planning the big city hall, we planned on this happening so that we could make city hall happen. And that's one of the reasons we're maintaining the taxing that we are right at the moment.
Good point, Paul. Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Well, this portion of the agenda allows any person to express ideas, concerns, comments, or issues. If you would like to comment on this public hearing item, we have this allotted time and portion of this meeting. You can do so online if you'd like by emailing lmagness, MAGNESS, @midvale.com. When commenting, please limit your comments to 400 words, which would take about 3 minutes to read. Include your first and last name, your city of residence, though that is optional, and include the name of the agenda item, which would be the Truth and Taxation hearing. City staff will only read into the record the equivalent of about 3 minutes or 400 words, so please be concise with your statements. So we'll give a couple of minutes, so any comments that may be coming in online, we can read into the record.
No, Mayor, no comments.
While we're waiting, I'd like to comment again. I am thankful for the staff and our employees for working out this budget and being able to make it work for our citizens and not have to have a big tax increase or reduction in services. We appreciate each of them.
Thank you, Councilmember Glover. Good comment. We're not seeing any comments come in online. We'll give it another minute, and then I will ask the council to make a motion on 3 different action items. The first one will be to consider Resolution 2020 R35, setting the rate of tax for calendar year 2020 and levying taxes upon all real and personal property within the corporate boundaries of Midvale City, Utah. The second action will be to consider Resolution 2020 R36, adopting the final operating and capital budgets for Midvale City, State of Utah for fiscal year 2021. And the third action will be to consider Resolution 2020 R37, adopting the employee job classification plan and benefit package for fiscal year 2021. We are receiving no instruction or input from the public, so I will entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I move that we close the public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to close this public hearing. Any comments or questions on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Hearing none. It's time for motions. So who would like to take these motions on, please?
I'm not seeing the motions in our packet.
They're on the agenda if you have access to that.
They're in the staff report, Dustin, that Kyle prepared. It's just in the middle of it. I tried to highlight them so you could see them.
Okay.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, go for it, Paul.
I move that we adopt resolution number 2020-R-35, setting the tax or the rate of tax for calendar year 2020 and levying taxes upon all real and personal property within the corporate boundaries of Midvale City, Utah.
Second.
First motion and a second to it. Any comments or questions upon this motion? Hearing none, Rory, would you ask the questions?
Yes, Councilmember Glover,
Aye.
Robinson,
Aye.
Brown,
Yes.
Gettle,
Yes.
and Sperry.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll entertain the second action resolution.
Mayor, I move that we approve resolution 2020-R-36, adopting the fiscal year 2021 budget for Midvale City.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments upon this motion? Rory, would you ask the question again?
Yes, Councilmember Robinson,
Aye.
Brown,
Yes.
Gettle,
Yes.
Sperry,
Aye.
and Glover.
Aye.
Thank you. We'll now move to the final action item. Adopting the employee job classification plan and benefit package.
Mayor, I move that we adopt resolution number 2020-R-37, a resolution adopting the Midvale City employee job classification and benefit package for fiscal year 2021.
Second.
We have a motion and seconds. Any questions or comments on this final action item? Rory, would you ask the questions again?
Yes, Councilmember Brown,
Yes.
Gettle,
Yes.
Sperry,
Aye.
Glover,
Aye.
and Robinson.
Aye.
Okay, that concludes our action items. I'll entertain a motion to, well, let's see, this is Paul Glover's ace call.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you. We are adjourned.
Good night.
Great job, everyone. Thanks.
Thank
Good night.
you. Bye.